When the dusty doors of the Montana Inn swung open, every head turned. She stood there, a young woman in a travel-worn wedding gown, her eyes sharp with pride and fear. Evelyn Hart, a mail-order bride promised to a man twice her age, had arrived to meet her destiny. But destiny was not the man waiting at the altar. It was the waiter boy, Jesse Callen, a rough-edged, blue-eyed ranch hand moonlighting as a server whose quiet defiance matched her fire. Their first encounter crackled like lightning. She demanded respect, he refused to bow. What began as friction became a battle neither expected, one between duty and desire. Between the lives they were told to live and the love they never saw coming. The Montana wind cut across the dusty frontier town, stirring tumbleweeds across the boardwalks and rattling the wooden shutters of the local inn. Evelyn Hart's carriage slowed as she approached the weathered building, her hands clutching the edges of her worn travel cloak. The journey from the city had been long, exhausting and lonely. Every mile had carried her further into uncertainty, and with each passing hour, the fear of the life she had been promised gnawed at her resolve. Inside the inn, the faint scent of roasted coffee and wood smoke mingled with the sounds of clinking dishes and low conversation. Jesse Callen, the young waiter, moved among the tables with practiced ease. His sleeves were rolled up, forearms dusted with flour and faint scars from ranch work. And his piercing blue eyes caught every detail in the room, including the sudden hush that fell as Evelyn entered. She was striking, tall, elegant even in her travel-worn dress, with sharp eyes that scanned the room as though daring it to judge her. But her appearance carried a quiet tension, a mix of pride and wariness, signaling a woman both used to following rules and ready to break them. Jesse's first impression was immediate. There was fire in her stance, a refusal to bow to expectation, and he felt a strange, unfamiliar pull. He stepped forward, a tray in hand, and tried to greet her with polite distance. "Evening, ma'am. Table for one?" he asked, voice steady but tinged with curiosity. Evelyn's eyes flicked to him, sharp and assessing. "Table for one, and make it quick. I have places to be," she said, her tone clipped but tinged with exhaustion. He raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smirk playing across his lips. "Places to be, huh? Seems to me you've already got the entire town staring at you." She stiffened, the corner of her mouth twitching in irritation. "And you are?" "Jesse, I work here. I keep things running smoothly," he replied, keeping his tone neutral but steady, refusing to cower under her gaze. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. He was bold, unafraid, even cheeky. That startled her more than she expected. Usually, strangers deferred to her presence, or worse, tried to impress her with flattery. Jesse did neither. As he led her to a small, quiet table near the window, Evelyn couldn't help but notice the way he moved, confident yet casual, unpolished but efficient. He placed a menu before her with a practiced hand. "Whatever you choose, it'll be ready. Or not, if you prefer to starve." Evelyn blinked at the dry humor, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips despite herself. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of ease, a small crack in the armor of tension she'd carried since leaving home. But as she settled into the chair, the edge of curiosity sharpened. Who was this boy with the fearless eyes, standing in a world where she was meant to feel powerless? And why, despite herself, did she feel like her journey had just taken an unexpected turn? The arrival had ended. The real story, the collision of worlds, wills, and hearts, was just beginning. Evelyn had barely opened the menu when she realized that Jesse wasn't going to make this easy. His eyes, sharp and unflinching, followed her every movement. "You know," he said, leaning casually against the edge of the table, "most people don't just stroll in here wearing city shoes in the dirt like that." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, and her fingers gripped the edge of the menu. "And most people don't make comments about strangers as if they're reading my life story," she shot back, her voice cool but tinged with fire. Jesse smirked, unbothered. "Touché, but consider it an observation. You're clearly out of place here. And you?" she challenged, leaning slightly forward. "Are you always this rude to guests, or am I special?" A spark of amusement flashed in Jesse's eyes. "Special? Maybe. Or maybe you just look like someone who could use a little reality check, Evelyn bristled. I don't need a reality check from a... She paused, trying to measure her words carefully. Waiter. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Call me what you want. Just don't expect me to bow. That's not how the world works here. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the odd thrill of being challenged. Every word he spoke was like a spark striking flint. Irritating, yes, but also oddly exciting. She found herself leaning back slightly, trying to maintain composure, yet she couldn't ignore the curiosity building inside her. And what exactly makes you think I care about your rules? She demanded, her voice sharp, but betraying a hint of intrigue. Jesse shrugged, a playful glint in his eye. I don't know. Maybe it's the fire I see in you, or maybe I just like seeing someone try to hold their ground. Evelyn blinked. His words were unexpected. Not flattery, not mockery, but something in between, a recognition of strength she hadn't anticipated. She tried to respond, but Jesse's easy confidence made her tongue stumble. For a moment, the air between them felt charged, almost magnetic. The inn's usual chatter faded into the background. All that existed was her controlled pride and his unapologetic boldness colliding like two storm fronts. Finally, Evelyn exhaled sharply. Well, Mr. Reality Check, she said, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. Serve me something edible before I decide whether you're completely insufferable or surprisingly interesting. Jesse's grin widened, genuine and mischievous. Challenge accepted, ma'am. And with that, the first true battle of wills began. Not of hatred, but of curiosity, respect, and the faintest hint of something neither of them dared to name yet. The morning sunlight spilled through the inn's wooden shutters, casting warm lines across Evelyn's travel-worn gown. She had arrived ready to meet her future husband, but what she found instead left her breathless and furious. Her fiancé, the wealthy ranch owner, was nothing like the charming letters had promised. He barked orders at the inn staff, dismissed her presence entirely, and even hinted at threats should she resist his control. Every word, every gesture made it painfully clear that the life she had been promised was a gilded cage, one she could not and would not endure. Panic and anger surged within her. She needed to escape, but the town was small, the streets watched, and every exit seemed blocked by expectation. That's when she remembered Jesse. He was quietly stacking dishes in the corner when she burst into the inn's main room, breathless. Jesse, she hissed, grabbing his arm. His eyes widened with surprise, but he didn't flinch. Slow down, ma'am. What's wrong? He asked, his calm voice cutting through her panic. My fiancé, I can't... She struggled for words, anger and fear, mixing into a storm of emotion. Jesse's gaze sharpened. Without hesitation, he nodded once, decisively. Follow me. He led her to a small back room, dimly lit but safe. The moment the door clicked shut, Evelyn exhaled, leaning against the wall. Her hands shook slightly, the first sign of vulnerability she had allowed anyone to see in months. Jesse's presence was grounding, his calmness a contrast to the chaos of her emotions. You don't have to face this alone, he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. I don't know everything about your world, but I know one thing. No one should have the right to scare you like that. For a moment she stared at him, stunned. His sincerity, his strength, and the quiet authority he carried were unlike anyone she had ever known. She had entered this town prepared to surrender to a life of obligation. But Jesse's words stirred a daring thought. Freedom could be within reach. The tension between them was electric, but it wasn't about romance yet. It was about trust, safety, and the first real connection she had felt in months. Slowly, carefully, Evelyn nodded. I need to get out of there. Will you help me? Jesse's grin was brief but firm, reassuring. I've got you. And just like that, the first seeds of partnership, mutual respect, and eventual love were sown. Evelyn realized that Jesse was more than a waiter. He was someone who could match her fire with his own. Someone who would stand beside her when the world demanded obedience. The broken promise of her fiancé became the catalyst. The moment she chose courage over compliance, freedom over fear, and the beginning of a story that neither of them could have predicted. The storm outside had grown fierce, drumming against the inn's windows like an urgent percussion. Inside, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow that softened the edges of the room and illuminated Evelyn's tense features. She had never expected that fleeing her fiancé would lead her here, to a quiet back room with a young waiter who was proving far more capable and reliable than anyone else in her life. Jesse moved around the room, setting down a tray of simple food he had prepared, his hands steady despite the storm raging outside. "Eat something," he said, his tone casual but layered with concern. "You can't run on adrenaline alone." Evelyn glanced at him, a faint smirk tugging at her lips despite herself. "You really think I'd let a waiter boss me around?" He chuckled, leaning against the mantel, eyes sparkling with playful defiance. "Not bossing, advising, big difference. And right now, you need advice." Her laughter was soft, almost involuntary, filling the space between them with warmth. For a moment, the walls she had carefully built around herself, pride, fear, and years of obedience, trembled. "You're different," she admitted, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I didn't expect someone like you to—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. Care." Jesse's expression softened, a rare seriousness breaking through his playful demeanor. "Care isn't always about grand gestures," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's about showing up when no one else will, and standing firm even when it's not convenient." "You deserve that," Evelyn's breath caught. The simplicity and sincerity of his words struck a chord deep within her. For the first time, someone wasn't looking to control her, judge her, or profit from her. He was here, entirely present, entirely himself. She looked down at the tray he had prepared, then back at him, their eyes meeting. In that shared glance, something unspoken passed between them. Respect, trust, and an undeniable spark that neither could ignore. Jesse noticed it too. The faint shift in her posture, the hesitation in her eyes, the almost imperceptible tilt of her head toward him, all signs that the careful, distant woman she presented to the world was starting to melt just a little. The night stretched on, and with every shared story, every laugh, and every moment of quiet understanding, the distance between them shrank. What began as mutual curiosity and playful defiance evolved into a magnetic connection neither could resist. By the time the storm subsided and the first light of dawn crept through the shutters, Evelyn realized she was no longer afraid, not of her circumstances and not of Jesse. And Jesse realized that the fire he had glimpsed in her eyes that first night wasn't just rebellion. It was courage, determination, and a heart strong enough to match his own. In that small back room, amidst the storm's fading echoes, a bond had formed, one built on trust, admiration, and the first sparks of a love neither expected, but both were beginning to crave. The sun had barely risen over the frontier town when whispers began to circulate like wildfire. Evelyn Hart, the mail-order bride who had dared to flee her fiancé, was now the subject of every gossiping tongue in the streets. What had started as curiosity turned quickly into judgment. Eyes followed her wherever she went, and doors that had once been neutral now seemed closed to her. Jesse could sense the tension before Evelyn even spoke. They were walking back from a supply run, her hand brushing against his lightly as if seeking reassurance. "Everyone's talking," she said quietly, a shadow crossing her features. "They'll never let me be." He stopped mid-step, turning to face her. His blue eyes, calm yet steely, met hers. "Let them talk. Rumors don't hurt us unless we let them." "You're not alone, Evelyn. Not anymore." Her lips parted, a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Most people would have judged her, mocked her, or turned away. But Jesse, he wasn't most people. Their moment of quiet reassurance was broken by a commotion ahead. A group of townsfolk, led by a few of the ranch owner's men, had gathered near the inn, voices raised and pointing fingers. "That's her!" She ran away. "She doesn't belong here." One man shouted. Evelyn instinctively stepped back, heart pounding. But Jesse placed a firm hand on her shoulder, guiding her forward. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice low and commanding. There was no fear in his tone, only resolve. As the crowd surged closer, Jesse stood tall, positioning himself between Evelyn and the angry townspeople. "She's with me," he declared. "No one will touch her. If anyone has a problem, they'll have me first." The murmurs of outrage softened, replaced by uneasy glances. Jesse's confidence and unwavering stance silenced many of the skeptics. Even those who had initially sought to intimidate them hesitated. There was something in him, a quiet strength that demanded respect. Evelyn looked up at him, awe mingled with an unspoken warmth. Here was a man who didn't just talk about protecting someone. He acted, without hesitation, without questioning himself. Her heart swelled with a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Safety, trust, and something far deeper. As the crowd finally dispersed, muttering but defeated, Jesse turned to her. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, unable to speak at first. Her hand found his again, gripping lightly. I think I'm starting to be," she whispered. In that moment, amidst the remnants of fear and gossip, a bond solidified. Evelyn realized that Jesse wasn't just a protector in the moment of danger. He was a partner, someone who could stand by her side when the world demanded compliance, when courage alone wasn't enough. The storm of the town's judgment had passed, leaving behind a new understanding, a growing trust, and the first true glimmers of love. The evening sky was painted in hues of gold and amber as Evelyn and Jesse rode side by side along the quiet ridge outside town. The tension that had existed between them for days, weeks even, had softened into something neither of them had expected. A connection that was equal parts admiration, respect, and the faint stirrings of love. Evelyn glanced at Jesse, his profile outlined against the sunset. She had spent her life believing that love was a luxury reserved for fairy tales, something fragile and fleeting. But Jesse had shown her otherwise. With every act of protection, every quiet gesture of understanding, he had taught her that love could be strong, steadfast, and transformative, breaking the silence. She finally spoke, her voice trembling just slightly. "Jesse, I thought I knew what strength was. I thought I understood life and duty, but I was wrong." Jesse looked over, curiosity and warmth in his eyes. "Wrong about what?" She took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the ground briefly before meeting his eyes again. "About love, about trust, about what it means to rely on someone and to let someone rely on you. You've shown me all of that. I can't explain it, but I feel it. Stronger than anything I've ever felt." Jesse's chest tightened, his hands instinctively brushing against hers. "Evelyn, I've never met anyone like you. You're fierce, clever, and stubborn as the day is long. And I've admired that fire from the moment I saw you. I never expected us." She smiled softly, a mix of relief and wonder. "Neither did I. For a moment, words weren't necessary." They slowed their horses, letting the golden light wrap around them. Their hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining. The storm of their past struggles, her broken promise, the judgment of the town, the fear of the unknown, all melted into the quiet certainty of the moment. Jesse leaned in slightly, not rushing, letting her see the sincerity in his eyes. "Evelyn, I don't care about titles or money or what anyone thinks. All that matters is you. All that matters is us. Are you willing to try with me?" Her heart swelled, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of fear lift. "Yes," she whispered, her voice steady now, filled with conviction. "With you," the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in rich shades of pink and orange as they shared a quiet, lingering moment of connection, a gentle touch, a soft gaze, the kind of intimacy that spoke louder than words. It was not rushed. It was profound, a perfect balance of passion and respect, fire and tenderness. As they rode back toward the town, hand in hand, the world around them seemed smaller, quieter, as if it too recognized the bond that had been forged through trust, courage, and shared struggle. The fiery sparks that had ignited in a back room, in the face of judgment and danger, had grown into a steady flame of love, one neither could deny and neither could ever let go. The town lay quiet in the early morning light. The streets empty, except for the soft clip-clop of horses' hooves. Evelyn and Jesse rode side by side, not as fugitive and protector, but as partners, equals in courage, in heart, and now in choice. Evelyn's hair caught the breeze, sunlight glinting off strands that had once been dulled by worry and confinement. Her eyes, bright and unguarded, met Jesse's, and she smiled, not the polite, measured smile she had shown to strangers or patrons before, but a true smile full of freedom and possibility. Jesse glanced at her, his jaw relaxed for the first time in weeks. The boyish, self-deprecating humor that had once marked his demeanor had matured into a quiet confidence. He knew that he had not only protected her physically, but had also nurtured the courage in her heart to take back her life. They rode toward a stretch of open plains where the horizon seemed endless and unbound. Here, no rules of expectation or wealth could touch them, only the wide sky, the rising sun, and the promise of a life built on trust and love. Evelyn's hand brushed against Jesse's, and he took it without hesitation. The touch was gentle, grounding, and spoke volumes of the bond that had grown between them. She had entered this town as a bride sold into obligation, and now she was choosing her own path, side by side with the man who had proven that courage and kindness were stronger than any contract. They stopped atop a small rise, the wind carrying the scent of wild grass and distant pine. Evelyn rested her head briefly on Jesse's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "I never imagined this," she murmured softly. "Neither did I," Jesse replied, his voice low but certain. "But I wouldn't change a thing, not a moment." Below them, the town shimmered under the morning sun, indifferent yet welcoming to those brave enough to forge their own destiny. Together, they gazed forward, not at the past they had escaped, but at the future they would build. And in that quiet, cinematic moment, everything shifted. The young mail-order bride was no longer a pawn, and the waiter was no longer just a boy. They were two hearts, fearless and free, choosing love, trust, and each other. The camera of the mind could linger on that scene forever, two figures silhouetted against the rising sun, hand in hand, riding toward hope, possibility, and a life entirely their own. The story had begun with tension, pride and fear, but it ended with courage, trust and love that transcended circumstance, leaving a lasting image of freedom, transformation, and emotional triumph.